100,000 homes.
I woke up, my power was off, I went to check on something, I started to walk, there was up ankle deep water. I looked outside, it was like a raging river on each side, and then they came and they took us out in the boats.
As the storm moves past, governors are urging their residents not to get complacent.
Yesterday, we asked you to prepare for the storm. Today, I'm asking you to stay home.
Henri is not done yet. The storm is expected to stall near the Connecticut-New York border, moving to southern Massachusetts on Monday and near Nova Scotia on Tuesday. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New Jersey.
Now, another hurricane, Grace, hit Mexico's Gulf Coast this weekend. Winds over 200 kilometers there, blasted as Grace made its second landfall in as many days. One of the most powerful storms to hit that coast in years. 8 people were killed. Now, let's turn to Canada's COVID-19 story tonight and a troubling trend that's ramping up as summer winds down. This is the cause of the growing concern as fall draws closer. The rolling 7-day average of new infections across the country has been climbing steadily for a month, from below 400 to now well over 2,000, and that is despite climbing vaccination rates. Almost 75% of eligible Canadians have now had both shots. In some places in this country, this weekend brought new worries and even new restrictions. Renee Filippone explains.
It's part of BC under the toughest COVID restrictions, but life carries on in Kelowna.
I'm not overly concerned, but I am also in favor of putting our vaccines so that we can all get through this and go back to normal as soon as possible.
BC's interior has been a hotspot for COVID infections. As a result, masks are mandatory again across that health region. And with increased pressure on hospitals, there is a return to limits on indoor personal gatherings.
The trend has not been so great over the past few weeks. We've been seeing the cases double about every 9 or 10 days.
This COVID modeling expert says plans to fully reopen the province on September 7th will likely be delayed because of the surging Delta variant.
But it wouldn't surprise me too much to see the whole province moving back maybe to a mask mandate within a few weeks.
BC isn't alone. The Northwest Territories are under such pressure, the Army has been called in to help.
So we're starting to see the disparities of these small communities which lack the basic necessary services of healthcare, RCMP service, and other things.
It's even affected the election campaign. One candidate says he is suspending in-person campaigning because of COVID concerns. The surge in cases across the West is enough for some frontline workers in Alberta to raise the alarm about potential staff shortages at hospitals.
I'm quite worried about how the healthcare system is going to manage it, how our frontline healthcare workers are going to come out on the other side of this.
All of this concern is a stark contrast to the festival atmosphere at Vancouver's Pacific National Exhibition.
It's one day that we all get together because we live all over the Lower Mainland now. So yeah, it's great. We're happy that it's open again.
Enjoying what's left of the summer, aware of the uncertainty that lies ahead. Renee Filippone, CBC News, Vancouver.
American civil rights pioneer Jesse Jackson has been hospitalized for COVID-19 despite being vaccinated. See him there, Reverend Jackson, getting his first shot back in January, now being treated in a Chicago hospital along with his wife, both in their late 70s. They tested positive on Saturday, according to a statement from Jackson's nonprofit. Many Haitians are still living without life-saving aid, more than a week after the country was struck by a devastating earthquake.
If you are in disaster yourself, you cannot help people in disaster. And the government is in a disaster.
Up next, finding the way forward for a country facing crisis after crisis. And later, with the Delta variant rising fast, a new focus on what we're breathing in.
I think ventilation to a great extent has been the missing piece in this discussion.
The push to improve air quality in the places we work and in the dark days of the pandemic, some much needed color.
As soon as they see the message, they just brighten up a little bit.
Spreading messages of hope on the sidewalk. We're back in a moment. U.S. Coast Guard units are evacuating people with severe medical issues from Haiti a week after the devastating earthquake that has now taken at least 2,200 lives. Rescue teams from Brazil and Mexico arrived this weekend. Haiti has been pleading for more foreign assistance, which has been slow to arrive. Now, it is hard to overstate the shock, fear, and emotional trauma so many Haitians are feeling after all of this. It has been crisis after crisis, tragedy after tragedy, and it's not clear how the situation will improve. Ellen Morrow has been in Haiti this past week, and tonight she looks at the many challenges ahead for this battered nation.
The rituals of death, pain so searing and so common now as Haiti suffers its latest crisis. While the dead are buried, the living languish. Desperately needed aid still just barely trickling through. I'm in pain, says this man who lost 4 relatives. Only God can help me. In the capital, Port-au-Prince, signs of Haiti's other crises. Its crushing poverty and lack of infrastructure are everywhere. So, too, are billboards of the country's recently assassinated president, Jovenel Moïse. Haiti was already mired in long-standing political turmoil before his killing. Now a debilitating power vacuum compounded by a devastating earthquake.
Haitians are used to live with the concept that there is no state, there is no government. This is a farmer's peace. This was very prestigious.
Jacques Lumarc, who once ran to be Haiti's president, is the rector of its leading private university. The school is helping restore cultural artifacts damaged in the 2010 earthquake that killed more than 200,000 people.
How does the political instability here impact the response to this most recent disaster?
The earthquake comes as a disaster, but we were also in a national disaster. If you are in disaster yourself, you cannot help people in disaster. And the government is in a disaster stress.
Haiti has a proud past, but a difficult history. Here, enslaved people threw off their French rulers, but were then forced to compensate them for more than a century. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It never really recovered from 2010. There are allegations that billions of dollars in aid has been mismanaged, and lawlessness is increasingly rampant.
People are fleeing because they cannot have any job, because the state cannot provide the environment to create wealth in the country.
And then you have a 7.2 magnitude earthquake.
This is, it's just like nature is against us.
Fritz Jean once served as Haiti's interim prime minister and governor of its central bank.
Crony capitalism, this is what we are experiencing in Haiti. Privilege granted to those people and the exclusion of the majority of the Haitian citizenship.
Before the earthquake, elections were set for November, but that plan may now prove impossible. Some want international help to stabilize the country, others fear even more outside influence. What's needed, says Lumarc, is a chance for the country to catch its breath.
Now you have to gather everybody on the table, listen to everybody, and design a strategy for, first, a new constitution, second, security, and third, elections.
Do you have hope that things are going to get better?
There are an opportunity to learn from these disasters and to become stronger.
But for now, Haiti's pain drags on.
Ellen, after a week in Haiti, you've seen this crisis firsthand, some awful scenes, as we've seen just there right now. What is sticking most for you?
Well, David, the need is so great in the hardest hit areas by this earthquake, and these are remote places that are hard to get to. So it's hard to think about some of these people just never getting the help that they need. The other hard part is thinking about all those children we saw this week with terrible injuries from this earthquake, struggling to get the care that they require in overrun, unsanitary facilities. And it really just is unclear how this immediate crisis is going to be addressed.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your reporting. That is Ellen Morrow in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, for us tonight. The world has watched what is unfolding in Afghanistan with horror, but for Canadian soldiers who served there, it's even harder to swallow. Coming up next, two veterans share their thoughts and their pain about Canada's legacy in Afghanistan. Plus,
it pulls the air in from the classroom, it filters it at that level, and then it brings it back into the classroom.
coming up, as the Delta variant rises, a new focus on workplace ventilation. But first, a preview of some special stories we're bringing you all this week. Moments of love and reunion, months and years in the making.
Quick last minute panic check. Passport, COVID test, vaccine card.
It had been 7 months since we saw each other.
Her and Zayden just boarded their second flight. I'm so nervous.
T-minus 10 days until I meet my brother for the first time.
I suspect that this will be kind of an emotional visit. I expect it to be very apparent that we're landing in Nova Scotia for the first time in my life that my father hasn't been there.
I haven't seen them since they left in August 2019. I would never have anticipated when I said goodbye to them then.
We made it!
So here we are at Tofino, the West Coast Vancouver Island, and we were so happy in the end to finally be able to reunite with our family.
A week after the Taliban took control of Afghanistan's capital, terrified people continue to rush the gates of Kabul's airport, desperate to get to safety. Now, among them, Canadians and Afghans who once worked with the Canadian military in the country. A former captain of Afghanistan's national women's soccer team says players still in the country are well known and therefore in danger. She has been advising them to scrub their profiles and pictures from social media, get out of their communities if they can, and to do something else. It's heartbreaking.
I have been telling them that please try to get rid of your national jersey, the jersey that I remember first time wearing for the first time in the history of Afghanistan, women wearing jersey, and it was the most beautiful feeling when I played with the jersey of Afghanistan women's national team. The pride, the happiness, and the feeling was amazing, and the feeling of winning. But it is hard. It's very tough for me to even thinking about it and talking to our players to get rid of your jerseys, to even burn down. It's your uniform, and if they find out, you will be in danger.
That fear and panic, the scenes of the Taliban retaking towns and cities, all of it cuts deep for members of Canada's armed forces who were deployed there. Service that came at great cost. 40,000 people served in Afghanistan over Canada's 12-year mission there. 158 lost their lives. Thousands more were wounded, physically and psychologically, leading to additional deaths by suicide. It was and is an immense sacrifice. So how do the people who put their lives on the line feel about what they're seeing now? Joining me now are two Canadian Armed Forces veterans who served in Afghanistan. Tyson Bowen served for 2 combat tours in 2007 and 2010, and Mike Akpata served in 2007. Thanks very much to both of you for taking some time out of your evening to speak with us. I want to start, if I can, with your respective missions in Afghanistan. And Mike, just starting with you, because you were in Kandahar in 2007, what did you feel at that time you were accomplishing?
What we were doing, or what I believed I was doing, was as part of the responsibilities when NATO went to Afghanistan. I, as a reservist, augmented 2nd Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment. And bottom line was this. Reservists have fundamental beliefs in support of Canada, in support of Canadian missions. My goal was to make sure that the gentlemen in the battle group, ladies and gentlemen, and those at the 4 operating bases got everything they need, and to do my duty when called upon to support Canadian missions in accordance with government policy.
I want to pick, Mike, up on a word you used, believed at the time. Is that just a phrase that you're using, or what were you, has something shifted in your mind?
It has become hard now. Watching the fall of Kandahar during the 4th of July, the 4th of July for our tour, dare I speak for Tyson as well, resonates because a number of Canadians were killed in an RG-31.
Yeah, so it's a fighting vehicle, yeah?
Yes, sir. An RG-31 is an up-armored vehicle called an Ayala that we used in Afghanistan. When Kandahar fell, I have friends who have come home with visible injuries, some with injuries hidden, and all of a sudden, we as a collective began to wonder, what did we do? What was it worth? But not so much for me, for the families of the fallen and the 199 or some odd Canadian veterans that have taken their lives. It's for those families. Because pundits are saying, they're talking about the amount of money that's been spent, the amount of treasure, and I remember those faces of every ramp ceremony I went to and those young men and women who I served with.
Tyson, listening to what Mike is saying, I imagine you're feeling some of the same things, but I wonder, what do you hold on to remember what was achieved?
The biggest thing that we can hold on to keep our heads held high is that we were called upon by the Canadian government to assist the government of Afghanistan, and we did our job to the utmost professionalism degree.
And yet you must face people in your own lives, and Tyson, I would go back to you on this, who question what it was all for.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do question what it's for, and that's going to be part of the healing process as we move forward. A lot of us are struggling right now, and I believe you will see an increased rate of suicide amongst veterans from Afghanistan and veterans who are still serving that have yet to deal with their internal traumas from while they were serving in Afghanistan. But like I said, the biggest thing that people need to know, and the men and women who are in uniform and that served in uniform, is that we did a job. We were called upon by our government, and we did it well. We supported the people of Afghanistan and the government of Afghanistan. And now our role is to support the people of Afghanistan who want to get out of there.
What is your concern now, Mike, in terms of taking care of the veterans and all of those who remain in Afghanistan?
My biggest concern is during our missions, we were the number 3 RG-31. So sometimes we had the interpreter in our vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to suggest that we became friendly, but I knew him. I know his name. I have pictures of him. I don't know if his dedication to keeping us alive has cost him his life, has cost his family their lives. Is he in hiding? Is he out?
Briefly, Mike, do you believe we have a commitment to people like that? And if so, have we lived up to that commitment?
I believe this. When I took my oath to get into the military, I swore an oath to defend this country. I swore an oath to Her Majesty, her heirs and successors, like every other Canadian soldier has done. Those people would not have done what they did. Those women would not have run to be mayors. Those female police chiefs and police officers would not have risked their lives and exposed their faces in magazines and interviews if they just thought that we were going to melt away into the evening. So I truly believe that a country, an individual, is only as good as his, her, the national word that we give to people. I'm sorry, but I'm very heartbroken that I don't believe that we've fulfilled our responsibilities to those that trusted us so much.
Mike, Tyson, thank you, both of you, and please do take care.
Thank you, sir.
for having us.
Mask, distancing, and vaccines are widely seen as the best tools in the fight against COVID-19, but what about ventilation?
These are bag filters, so you're actually double filtering the air.
What some workplaces are doing. Welcome back. For Canadians working indoors and the many soon heading back, a growing body of research is putting new focus on ventilation to fight the spread of COVID-19. Ioana Remiliota shows us how some companies are tackling that.
The office towers are still pretty empty, but hundreds of people will come back to work here, and Sal Mantia is ready.
Let me take you for a tour of our building, HVAC systems, and how we're doing to combat COVID.
Mantia is operations manager for Choice Properties, and when it comes to filtering the air people share, his job starts here.
Let me show you how air is brought into the building here. This is where air is introduced to the main shaft of the building. As you can see here, the dampers are wide open, allowing for 100% fresh air to come in.
Before that outdoor air goes any further, it passes through a wall of high-grade filters.
First set of filtration is coming through these filters. They are MERV 13 filters.
What does MERV 13 mean?
MERV 13 is a grading of filters. So the higher the MERV rating means that it can capture smaller particles.
The duct tape is an added measure.
Duct tape here actually forces the air to pass through the filter. There's always a bit of leakage.
And why is it so important to do all this?
Well, we want to make sure that we have a safe environment for our tenants to set up shop and work. And it's what we do. This is our business. This is what we take pride in our buildings. We want to make sure that we are providing safe work environments.
COVID has made clean air more important than ever because the risk of airborne transmission of the virus is now clearer than ever. And we're not talking about someone sneezing or coughing close to you, but from tiny infected particles expelled and inhaled when people are talking, singing, or shouting. Those aerosols can travel in a cloud indoors for longer distances and linger in the air indefinitely. Public health authorities in Canada only recently acknowledged the aerosol risk. The guidance on how to manage it is still emerging. The places acting on the threat didn't wait for it.
Our public health standards talk about good ventilation. So what's good ventilation? How do you actually quantify that from an engineering perspective? So we've relied on the science that's out there.
Ron Saporta is the Chief Operating Officer at the University of Toronto. He started tracking the aerosol research from the start. The university has a mix of century-old and modern buildings. MERV 13 filters were installed and the volume of fresh air increased, especially in high-density spaces like classrooms.
This is one of our buildings at
the airborne risk is higher the longer more people are indoors together.
And I'm going to show you one of our classrooms where we put in one of the air purifiers.
But some spaces are harder to purify through mechanical ventilation. Saporta had portable air cleaners with high-grade HEPA filters installed in those rooms.
So there's a HEPA filter in there. It pulls the air in from the classroom, it filters it at that level, and then it brings it back into the classroom. So what we've decided to do was to set up a specific target for ventilation in our classrooms. And what we've done is we've set it at 6 air changes per hour. So 6 air changes per hour, it's about the ventilation rates you'd see in hospitals and places like clinics.
Clean air is a critical piece, especially as the race between variants and vaccines continues. But it's not clear how many settings are taking ventilation precautions, even among ones that have been operating this whole time. We reached out to several essential workplaces that had numerous past outbreaks. They either declined to speak to us or didn't respond to our inquiries.
Hi, everyone. As people start returning to work, what is it they should be aware of?
Raising awareness is critical, and why a group of aerosol experts has come together.
Cleaning the air will do much more than cleaning and disinfecting everything in sight.
Marianne Levitsky is an occupational hygienist, an expert in workplace safety. She says safe air is critical to a safe workplace.
If you look at the major outbreaks that happened in workplaces, we have to ask why. Because we know, at least the employers said, they were implementing the measures that they were being requested to implement, plexiglass barriers, masks, distancing, cleaning, etc. And yet workers were still getting sick. So what was not being implemented? Well, it was probably good ventilation and proper respiratory protection.
And what is your main concern right now?
My main concern is that we're not paying enough attention to the aerosol nature of the virus and the fact that it can be transmitted in the air. So I think ventilation to a great extent has been the missing piece in this discussion.
Sean Stone learned that the hard way.
I think when something impacts you personally and very, very close to you, it hits home.
Let's just have a look at the Rogers.
Stone and several of his dozen employees got sick with COVID last spring, despite following all the public health precautions.
And we make sure that the dates are correct. And
his company distributes electronic components. As an essential business, it's been open the whole time.
We don't need or want to wait for the government to do the right thing. And the right thing is to create a healthy, safe environment for our people to come and work. I think the worst thing for somebody would be to be worried about their well-being going to work every day. So we're trying to mitigate that as much as we can.
I'm just going to go and stick the O2 meter outside.
That included connecting with industry advocate Larry Gold,
397 to 398 parts.
who is helping small businesses figure out what they can do to mitigate the aerosol risk. Measuring CO2 levels is one way to detect a concentration of unfiltered air.
397, which is minuscule difference.
So is keeping the space well ventilated. The warehouse door stays open most of the time, and the plan is to keep it open regularly, even when the weather gets colder.
So ideally, we do want it to be in the middle of the room. Obviously, because of the different obstacles, we're going to have to play around with it.
And in the office area, where airflow is more limited, Stone invested in 4 portable air cleaners with HEPA filters.
We got one in this area, one in there. We got one in this room here.
On top of all this, Stone is also offering his employees a bonus to get vaccinated.
I don't think it's our job to push people towards vaccination. I think we can promote it. So what we did as a little company was we offered to the staff a $100 bonus for the first jab and another $100 for the second jab.
And you didn't think that that was enough to have a vaccinated workforce?
Oh, definitely not. Our fear is that the only measure the government has is lockdown and vaccinations. I don't think that's good enough. I don't think lockdown is acceptable anymore.
A layered approach is key. Back at the University of Toronto, they're even testing wastewater for COVID in residences and have already identified one case. As for Choice Properties, rapid testing is offered at some of its buildings. There are at-home testing kits too, and the usual wipes. And employees also get higher-grade masks.
So even after we have the MERV 13 filters, we're actually filtering it again through another set of filters.
Back in the boiler room, a reminder of how much is at stake.
These are bag filters. So you're going through MERV 13, and now you're going through this set of filters. So you're actually double filtering the air.
Wow, that's a lot of filtration.
It is a lot of filtration. We are doing this because we need to do this.
Especially as more people go back indoors and go back to breathing in the same air. Joanna Rumiliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
Next on The National, how a pandemic coping mechanism turned into a neighborhood tradition. It started as a pandemic pastime, a little color on the sidewalk to lift spirits. But it has become a habit for one Ontario neighborhood. The message and the medium is our moment.
It started as something that I did just to pass the time. Playing with the kids and adding some chalk art to the sidewalk was just my way of beautifying the neighborhood, maybe adding some positive things. The first message that I wrote was, everything will be okay. As soon as they see the message, they just brighten up a little bit. One day, somebody walked by, and I don't think that they knew that we could see them, and he pulled a box of sidewalk chalk out of his pocket and put it on the sidewalk right in front of my house, and just kind of like, it was like a little thank you for the work that we had done, and that really warmed my heart. It kind of spurred me on and made me feel like I could keep going, and I feel like it's my responsibility now. I'm making this little contribution to the neighborhood. My hope is that, you walk by and you see this message and it gives you just a little bit of hope and a little bit of support to go on and do something better.
We have had some very heavy days, so that is just lovely to see. Thanks so much. That is The National for August 22nd. Good night.